Good morning, and thanks for the welcome, Sonia. It's great to be back at ACCES. So my name is Michelle Hennikin, and I'm a resource manager with Robert Half. I've been with us for almost 20 years, 20 years at the beginning of next year. So this is one of the first of a series of 3 webinars I will be doing with ACCES during the summer months. So today's topic will be on the resume refresh, writing the perfect resume and cover letter. I think many people on this webinar have heard you never get a chance to make a second chance to make a first impression. And during the job search process, this is often very, very true. There's a lot of competition for every job opening. And one of the first ways that you're making an impression is through a well-crafted resume and cover letter. It's one of the single most important parts of a successful job search because the resume is often what's getting you into the door to meet with the hiring manager. So it's the first opportunity you'll get to make your case on why you should be hired and can lead directly to an employment interview and hopefully a job. Some people think it's simple as just listing your work experience and your skills and you're done. But there's an art to the resume and cover letter writing, and we're going to run through some of those secrets today. So research conducted by our firm indicates hiring managers on average just spend 2 minutes reviewing an applicant's resume. So you don't have a lot of time to convince an employer you're the right person for the job. Your resume needs to be concise, to the point, and targeted if you want to make a positive impression within those 2 minutes. So your resume needs to be simple, easy to understand, and give tangible insight into your experience. It also needs to be keyword rich and show a complete snapshot of your professional experience. If you're a newer graduate, or new to the workforce, just out of college or university, you might not have a lot of work experience to highlight, but you may need to draw on class projects, labs, seminars to build your hard and soft skills in your resume. You likely already know to customize a cover letter specific to a company, but you should definitely be doing that same thing with your resume. It may take more time and effort, but the payoff can be, an interview. So really worth doing so. And if you're applying to several positions with the same job title, the keywords and requirements may still be slightly different. So choosing a resume format, we're going to run through 3 basic styles. Many might know this on the call: chronological, functional, and combination. So a chronological resume, it's probably more likely the one you've seen throughout your career and probably the one you've most likely prepared. It's definitely common. It's easy to follow as it lists your work experience in reverse chronological order and shows your employers your duties and accomplishments for each job. Many people prefer this resume. It's easy to follow, the snapshot of your work history, gives prominence to what you're doing now, usually responsibilities and skills you're most proud of. And it's a good idea to use this resume. The position you desire is in a field that you have a strong record of success in, and the strongest aspect of your career is reflected in this this style of resume. So the other sort of common is a functional resume. It's organized around skills, experiences, accomplishments, and instead the headings might read customer service experience, management trainee skills, as opposed to, customer service manager, ABC company. The functional resume omits entirely or mentions only in broadly terms the jobs you've held and when. This allows you to shift the focus away from the aspects of your background that might prevent employers from considering you. So for example, that might be a large gap in your employment history. But a lot of hiring managers will look at this with a suspicious eye for that reason. Most companies prefer a chronological version to a functional. Some people use the functional if they're an entry-level job seeker and limited experience, so they're focusing it on those skills and experiences. You're entering the job force after time away. Your past jobs do not demonstrate growth and responsibility. And if you're going to submit this type of resume, you want to spend extra time crafting your cover letter. Mention some of the companies you've worked for and the years of industry experience you possess. So a combination resume is a combination of the chronological and functionals, and that's becoming more popular. It combines the best of the chronological style, showcasing your work experience, but as well being able to showcase your skills and accomplishments under a functional heading. to give the reader a bit of a sketch of your work history, including a short list of your past positions and employers at the bottom. So you might use this maybe if you're not hearing back to your chronological resume. The link between your work history and a job opening is maybe not clear. And if you're still thinking about using a functional resume, you might want to reconsider and use a combination format to avoid some of the red flags hiring managers might pick up. So resume must-haves. Your resume needs to show measurable difference you made in previous roles, and present detailed metrics wherever possible. So you might have different numbers depending on your background, but some samples are, of things that you might want to include. How much revenue did you generate for your company by assisting in business development? How much did you increase customer engagement and or audience size through new business channels? How much did you save the department by implementing new workflows? How much did your recommendations to management help decrease costs and increase income? Did you spearhead an event that led to a new 6 new business opportunities? And did your website design result in increased traffic to a company website? By how much? Wherever possible, try to give actual numbers to show the impact you've had. It needs to be visually appealing. Create a professional design that matches your brand. Go for a clean look, logical headers, something that's easy to scan and reflective of the brand that you also have on LinkedIn. You always want to proofread and always have someone else proofread. It's always a good idea to maybe print your resume so you can look at it that way as opposed to on a screen to ensure there are no typos and no grammar mistakes. So definitely something to be doing because, those types of mistakes show a lack of attention to detail. And this is a crucial soft skill that managers are looking for. Reread and revise as you need to. Pick aside your resume, come back to it later. And then, ask a friend, ask someone that you trust to take a look at it. And, display your credentials. Employers are often looking for degrees and certifications. So display their abbreviations prominently on your resume. So maybe that's John Smith, CPA, in your summary, in your education and credentials section of your resume. So CAR statement. In your resume, you need to quickly and clearly demonstrate what makes you stand out. In other words, you must convey your unique value proposition. You can do this by focusing on specific accomplishments that benefited your past employer. So the C, a challenge, the conditions under which you took the work. The action, what did you do and what actions did you take? And resolution, the business impact of your actions. So for example, maybe if you're in accounting, you redesigned the monthly financial close, reducing time to close process from 1 week to 2 days. So you want to quantify your accomplishments with specific numbers. So definitely something to think about. And something as you're going through your career, sometimes you're forgetting about these accomplishments that you've had. So it's a really good idea to be maybe writing these down so you can remember things and have a file of sort of things that you've accomplished. So writing your resume, you don't need impeccable English to create a resume, but you do need a good command of the language and ability to clearly communicate your thoughts. We often see resumes where someone said, I did this. When your resume has your name on it, everyone knows that you're the subject of it. So you don't need to write with I throughout it. You want to keep sentences short. Resumes are crisp statements, which do not necessarily have a complete sentence. So you might be leaving out common articles like a and the. Write in plain English. Keep things simple. Don't try to impress potential employers with long words that can bog down your sentences. Use action-oriented words. Some good verbs might be solved, resolved, accomplished, achieved, initiated, improved, exceeded. Buzzwords like facilitated or participated in are weaker. They can often be seen as an attempt to obscure the lack of real effectiveness or experience. You want to stay away from jargon and buzzwords. Using bullet points is appropriate. Bulleted information is easier to read text and tends to stand out more than a solid block of text. Definitely, I know I get some resumes that, people have written a paragraph and it becomes very hard to read and go through. Include your contact information. So what you might be including is your name, your telephone number. So if you have, a home phone number and a mobile number, but the mobile number is where your voicemail is, then that's probably the number I would use on your resume, your email address, and as well any links to your website if you have one, or your LinkedIn profile. And you want to draft a summary statement. So this is the top of your page. It's valuable real estate. So you don't want it to be too long, but give a quick scan to your profile, so people can take a look and see whether they want to look and review more. So one thing, as you are compiling keywords, you're reflecting on certain aspects of your background, your job titles, your departments, and organizations. So make sure your job titles and the organizations are going to be what you have when you go to look and someone does a background check on you. When they go, and look at your resume and they go to your LinkedIn, make sure those things are going to match. You're going to want to include keywords. Applications are scanned now for keywords. It's not always a human looking at your resume. So you want to make sure that you have ones that are specific to your experience, your professional background. The more keywords in your resume, the better, but include them only if they accurately reflect your background. You might look at these by looking at, job ads, online, looking at resume of someone that maybe is hired for a position that you're looking for to see what kind of things they've looked in. But definitely if you're applying to a job, look at that job posting. So common resume questions that we get. How do I list temporary assignments? Treat the staffing firm you work for as one employer rather than listing each assignment, and emphasize the nature of work performed rather than the duration. How do I apply for multiple jobs with the same company? If you're submitting more than one resume, even for different positions, there's a chance that some will be seen as duplicates and tossed. So your best bet is to customize a version of your resume for each opening. Appropriate length. I mean, some people, might write 5, 6, 7-page manifestos, but they're definitely out. Ideally, a single page or 2 to 3 pages. For, maybe a staff level resume, 77% of seniors executives polled that they believe a single page is an ideal length, but in reality, sometimes those resumes will not get through an applicant tracking system because there won't be enough information in there. And how should I address employment gaps? So we did a survey and 93% of executives said they were concerned about a candidate's fit for a position. The resume showed, periods of unemployment. So you should proactively offer a brief explanation of those gaps. Sometimes you might do it in the first interview to alleviate those hiring managers' potential misgivings. Sometimes people are putting it in their cover letter. Don't try to camouflage it by leaving out dates. That just leads to a level of suspicion, from that prospective employer. And today, especially during the pandemic, it's not unusual to have been out of work or in contract positions with short breaks in between them for extended periods of time. Employers are more concerned with what you did during those gaps. So if you had any volunteer work, any educational course, or temporary assignments that you did, you should include that. What to leave out? Reasons for leaving. It's better to wait to address these issues within the interview, or if you're putting something into the cover letter. Your personal information. It's common practice to include or used to be a personal data, but due to current discrimination laws, this is no longer appropriate. So your resume should not include your marital status, religious and political affiliation, age, hobbies, country of origin, your family members' names, how many children you might have, your country of origin, date of birth. I've received resumes that have passport numbers and SIN numbers in them. We do not need those. And then references available upon request. You don't need to include this phase. If you get to that point in the job process, you will be asked, and definitely a good idea to submit your resume, your references separate from your resume, at that time, so you're not sharing your references, personal and contact information, to just anyone. So top application material blunders. CFOs were asked, what do you think is the most common mistake candidates make in their application materials? So 39% materials include irrelevant information. 29% materials contain typos or poor grammar. 19% the materials are not customized to the job the candidate is applying for. The materials, 8% materials focus on job duties and not accomplishments, and 5% had no answer or did not know. So some common resume pitfalls, cute and clever language. Hiring managers won't be amused by puns and jokes. So you just want to focus on your skills and experience. Typos and poor grammar, 84% of executives said it takes just 1 or 2 typological errors in a resume to remove a candidate from consideration for a job order or a job opening. Before you send it out, like we were saying before, read it out loud from top to bottom, have someone else, reread it to make sure everything is perfect. Misrepresentation, never lie on your resume or embellish the truth. Doing so could cost you the job or even lead to legal recourse. Vagueness, include enough detail to describe your experience and grab the hiring manager's attention. Listing only the job title and a very vague description of your contributions isn't fair and won't pique that company or hiring manager's interest. Overkill, you don't want to overdo it by using a ton of adjectives or business phrases. Write your resume so the hiring manager can quickly and easily understand what you bring to the table. And over personalizing it, so this might be including your favorite color or the name of your dog, things that don't need to be included. So getting your resume in print, often we're sending it electronically now, but when things open up in the world and potentially you might be going back to an in-person interview, you want to make sure you have a print version. So some tips to helping it look professional: using formatting elements such as boldface, you underline, italic. You might use those sparingly. Consider using bolding lettering to highlight certain categories like the job title. But you don't want to make your resume look too jumbled. Avoiding graphics and pictures. Your accomplishments alone should make your resume stand out. You want to stick to a single font to make sure it looks consistent. So, most stuff will work. Popular lettering includes Arial, Times New Roman, Palatino. I like Calibri. Using a font size between 10 and 14 points. You want to make sure that it isn't too hard, that it's too small to read, but if it's too big, it might take up a lot of space in your resume. And so printing it off, choosing a high quality paper, in something that's maybe a white, off-white, cream kind of color, because dark colors and texture paper may obscure the print once it's done. But always bring a resume printed to an interview in person. I've had it happen where I was going to interview a candidate, all of a sudden, the printer didn't work or the system, went down, and all of a sudden I couldn't print it and that candidate didn't have a resume on them. And that can lead to a bad start for an interview. So 78% of executives said a cover letters are valuable when evaluating job candidates. So definitely once you finish your resume, this is something you're going to want to go in and create. And there's some job postings that won't be looking for a cover letter, but this is a great way for you to be able to stand out. So, a lot of job seekers may not want to do it, but I think it's great. It's an introduction of you to that company and an opportunity to create a first impression out of the park. So some quick tips to winning a cover letter. When applying for a position electronically, paste your cover letter into the body of the email message you send to the hiring manager or into the appropriate space in an online application. So if you're emailing maybe a recruiter directly, you might be putting that cover letter into that email document. If you're saving it as a document, I suggest doing so as a separate document from your resume. And, keep in mind, not all online job services will allow you to take this step. So the necessity of a good cover letter, it's your first chance to make a good impression, is a way to direct attention to those aspects of your resume that are likely to push the right buttons. It demonstrates your knowledge about a company you're applying for, and as well as the industry. And it helps you represent your only means of explaining aspects of your work history that might otherwise portray you as being unqualified for this role. It's a great way to show that you've done that research in the company, its mission, its organizational culture, the key leadership. You can demonstrate your enthusiasm, for it. So definitely some tips to keeping in mind. So the first thing you should do before writing your cover letter is to take some time to think about what you want that letter to accomplish. You might want to determine one or two or even three key points you want to convey in the cover letter. So when you select will depend on your individual situation, but consider the following outcomes when thinking about your points. Do you want the reader to focus on 2 to 3 points in your resume, to ignore the fact that you may not have the exact background that he or she is looking for and should consider you for an interview anyways, to consider you for an interview even though some areas of your resume raise questions? Once you know what you want to convey, you can start to draft that cover letter. So the opening paragraph should announce the purpose of the letter, give the reader a compelling reason to read on. If you have a legitimate connection with the hiring organization, use that person's name in the introduction. If you don't know the gender, you could use dear sir, madam, in that subject line, and then take an opportunity to demonstrate your knowledge of the company by working in a fact or observation that may not be common knowledge. Developing the body of your letter, briefly explain your current employment situation. Say what you're looking for and why this position is of interest to you. Call out one or two points in your resume. So for example, if you're applying for a managerial role, maybe you're mentioning the size of teams and the budgets that you've managed previously. If it's a sales role, you might describe specific sales goals you've achieved in your last role or past roles. Further personalize it by demonstrating your familiarity with the specific industry, employer, and type of information. If someone from the company has recommended you apply for that position, you want to make sure you indicate that person's name and title. The body of the letter consists of 2 or 3 paragraphs. Briefly explains your current employment situation, and directs people to points in your resume you want them to. Remember that you're not only trying to convey what you want, but also what you can offer the potential employer. And so, your resume and cover letter may just be 2 components of an overall general, job search toolkit, but they're definitely the most critical to helping you land a job and get a foot in the door. So definitely you want to take the time to craft, your resume, your cover letter, so you're standing out. And you want to grab that attention immediately to hopefully get you that interview call and get you started on your, first job here or, subsequent jobs in the future. So thank you so much for joining me today. And I guess we'll open it up to Q&A.
Thank you so much, Michelle. That was great. What I'll do now is I will ask everyone to type in their questions into the Q&A tab, and I can see that we already have a few here. How can I address when applying for an entry-level position and having experience and titles for more than 10 years?
I think you're going to want to, talk about the skills and experience that you bring to that table. Coming here, many people, like I specifically work a lot in the banking financial services space. So if you were in a customer service capacity prior to moving here, maybe you're focusing, a lot of those skills and experience in your cover letter, in your resume with regards to that. And you also have to consider titles here are not necessarily maybe titles, that might be where you're coming from. So you want to make sure to focus a lot on those skills and experience when writing it.
Thank you. Do you know if there's anyone where people can find, the best cover letters or resume templates that are recommended?
I do not. You can go to our blog, which I know Sonia will share afterwards, which will have resume writing and tips and stuff like that. But I don't know that you're necessarily going to see examples there. I mean, this is your own document, so you don't want to some people will, I know, use some templates, and to be honest, we have a lot of challenges with them in submitting them to online tools. So I'm often having to have the candidate go and recreate the resume afterwards because they don't work that well in some online tools.
Thank you so much. And then we've got a lot of questions again asking for either a resume review or more samples. What you can do is you can call your closest ACCES location and someone can review your resume for you and provide some resume samples and cover letter samples for you as well. So call your closest ACCES location and someone can actually start helping you with your job search as well. Next question is, should they be including their volunteer history?
I would definitely do that. You never know when those skills that you gained as a volunteer might be helpful to you in a job. It might open, an area of discussion for you and the employer, whether that's HR or the hiring manager. And it's a great place to network too. So definitely I would include those.
Thank you. And is there any way of knowing if a company is using the ATS system to screen applications?
I would, in this day and age, definitely, I think a lot do. I personally look at every resume that I get submitted to me. But I'm not spending a lot of time looking at it. I am looking, I get resumes when I don't even have a role. So the first thing I'm looking for is am I seeing like financial services experience? Like what kind of experience is there? If there's not any, then I might just be sending it on to someone else. Because I likely won't be able to help them. But I would, in this day and age, I think a lot of people are using those systems. So I think you need to be focused on making sure that it's friendly for that kind of environment.
Thank you. And should people be adding their profile summary and highlight their skills on their resume?
If you do a profile summary, I wouldn't necessarily highlight like different points in the resume, but if you're doing a profile summary, make sure it's not too long. I see many where I get them and sometimes they're 1 or 2 pages of the resume and then they're getting to the work experience. By that point, I think people have checked out reading it. So, you may have a longer summary in your LinkedIn and you keep your URL there so someone can go there, but don't have it take out like the first page of your resume. And not get to your work experience at that point.
Thank you. And when submitting your resume, whether it's sending it directly to the hiring manager or uploading it on a company website, should you be using a Word format or a PDF format of your resume and cover letter?
I always need a Word format, but that's partially when I submit to my vendor clients that I work with. I need to be able to put that into a template to be able to do so. But I think you could do either or. I get a lot of PDFs, but then I have to go back to a candidate to get a Word version.
Is it, how would you go about explaining your employment gaps? And it's not, maybe it's because of taking care of your family or something like that.
I mean, as we said earlier in the presentation, either that's something you're having that discussion when you get the first interview. Some people are putting that in the cover letter. People don't tend to put them into resumes. But if you've done, so for example, maybe you've been away from the workforce for a bit, but maybe you've done some recent education, maybe you're moving that to the top of your resume, so that's the first thing you see, or that's part of the summary or cover letter.
Is it a good idea to use infographics in a resume?
So for example, like is the person referring to like the icons of people's like logos? I think if it's really fancy, sometimes it causes some issues in online portals. I think simple is better, as well as like I get some resumes where there's text boxes and tables and stuff like that, and that stuff does not, unfortunately, maybe in a PDF resume that's doesn't have to be put into a template later on, but otherwise they tend to cause a lot of formatting issues.
Thank you. With someone with no work experience at all, what would they put on their resume?
Well, I guess your education, if you've done any group work, any projects in school, and any volunteer work, summer jobs. I find people often leave out especially when they're starting their career. They may want to get into, a certain area, but they've actually worked. But since it's not related, they leave it out of their resume. But I think at that point, you definitely need to include that and, sell on the cross skills and, the soft skills you've developed and things you've learned. Because I'll get resumes where there'll be no work experience. And then I start asking and they're like, I worked at, Tim Hortons, I worked at the mall, and it's not even on the resume. And so if you have done some work experience, you definitely want to include that.
Thank you. Should you still apply for a job even if you don't have the required experience?
I mean, you probably, especially in an applicant tracking system, you probably won't get through, you'd be very unlikely you probably get through the system, if you don't have any experience that matches it. So for example, if I work on a role, for one of my clients, we're given, a list of must have and nice to have requirements. But, if someone doesn't even have any of those, I wouldn't put them forward because they won't even get through the initial screening to even get to the manager. So, I mean, you definitely have to have something, I think, that's a fit for that position. So a lot of job seekers out there, and, there's a lot of competition for those jobs. So definitely if someone's got the experience, that's going to bring them up in the rank to get potentially in front of that hiring manager.
Does it make a difference if you're using an email address which doesn't have like the regular domains like Gmail, Yahoo? Is it okay to use something else?
To be honest, I've never given it any thought. So I don't know. I think just if you have an email address, you want to make sure it's professional, using your name, you don't want anything sort of quirky or, so yeah, I would definitely use something that includes your name. If you have a common name, you might need to use, some numbers with it. You might have to use, Toronto or something, but, life is a beach at, hotmail.com. That might not be something that's so professional, as like, your actual name.
Thank you. And do you have to mention that you were laid off due to the pandemic? Would you mention that in your resume?
I wouldn't do it in the resume. Like I said before, the cover letter or when you're having those first discussions. Very, very common this last year for people to be out of work. But definitely, you're going to be asked that if you're not addressing it for sure.
Is it okay to include courses and training that you've attended to develop your skills?
Yeah. Yeah. And then you can also put those into LinkedIn. There's a place where you can put individual courses and stuff. So I definitely encourage you to work on your LinkedIn profile as well.
Is it okay to use your work experience from your home country?
Absolutely. I mean, that's valuable work experience regardless where it's from. So you definitely want to include it.
Okay. Would you address your employment gap issue? Like, would you explain it in your cover letter?
I think
why you were laid off?
It's up to you whether you're comfortable in a cover letter, if you want to do that when you have that discussion originally with them. I think that's a personal preference.
Does the ATS also scan the cover letter?
To be honest, I don't use an ATS, so but I would suspect it probably has the ability to do so.
And I know you already mentioned this, but some people might have missed it. What does a recruiter prefer, a 1 or 2 page resume?
To be honest, I'm much more prefer a 2-page. I find with a 1-page, most people leave too much content out that they probably wouldn't get screened in.
Okay.
And especially if you work for a long period of time, you will have definitely left a lot out if it's a 1-page resume.
All right. So someone's looking for a job as a web developer, and however, they don't have enough professional experience in the industry, but they have worked on some projects. How can they showcase this on their resume?
You might want to have them listed as projects. It's probably a separate category to employment. So whether it's under, educational projects, I know sometimes candidates might, show one of those projects in an interview. You just want to make sure it doesn't include any, proprietary or confidential information, but or sometimes people may develop something to show an employer when they have an interview.
Thank you. Should you send a cover letter even if it's not asked by the employer?
I would. It would be the chance to showcase your skills. Sometimes when I get emails for resumes, it might just say, please see attached resume, and that's it. Someone that's taken some time to, talk a bit about it is a way to stand out. Similar to sending maybe a thank you note after an interview. I think that doesn't happen so often. But that's one chance for a candidate to highlight that discussion and some of their skills after the interview.
Thank you. And do Canadian employers like to hire candidates who are outside of Canada? And do they prefer a visa sponsorship if they're not able to find someone suitable within the Canadian workforce?
To be honest, I don't know with Canadian employers what the preference is for my temporary roles. I need my candidate who's already here and available and has the work documentation in place, because while we've been work from home, that candidate can be called to the office at any time. That could be even just to pick up their technology, or they might say, we need the team to come in tomorrow, so that candidate physically needs to be here.
So I know we've been talking about ATS a lot, but some people might not know what that is. Could you explain what the ATS system is?
I mean, it's an applicant tracking system. So companies will use that to, be able to identify candidates. Because I'm not using it. It's really, I don't have the experience. I haven't used it. I physically look at every resume that I get sent to me.
Thank you. And is it a good idea to connect with a hiring manager on LinkedIn and send over a cover letter after the pre-screening interview?
You definitely can. You want to, I think you want to send a personal note. And it just depends, because some hiring managers might not take that, if they're in the interview process, they might not accept that. But I think definitely when sending LinkedIn invites, you want to include, a personal note and recap. I mean, if you have the email address of that person, you might want to email them directly afterwards. If someone's sending a thank you note after an interview that I placed them on, they send that thank you note to me for us to send. It depends. I think it's going to be the recipient. Some may be open to it, some may not. They might find it a little bit maybe aggressive, assertive. So I think it's really going to be very personal to the person receiving it and how they feel about it.
Thank you. And speaking of email addresses, how can you get email addresses of employees or recruiters to reach out directly to them?
It's trickier now with a lot of privacy pieces. So you might not be able to find those emails online. I mean, with recruiters, you probably will via their LinkedIn profiles or via job postings they might have online. So you might be able to find those easier. But hiring managers, it might be much more difficult because they may not have it. And, if you call a company, they might not provide it to you. They probably won't provide you their direct phone number. I know in case of some of the banks, when I've tried to call, sometimes they can't even, if you don't have that employee's direct line, they will not provide it. So I think it is getting a bit harder in that regard.
And how far back should you go with your experience on your resume? How many years?
Well, I don't even know if there's really a years. I think you want to focus more on the more recent roles that are there, but you might want to, include maybe less detail going farther back. But, you're also going to think based on the years that you finished your education, there might be a huge gap. So if all of a sudden, you've left out a big chunk of time, they might be wondering, why were you working? So you might focus less on the earlier roles and more on the roles right now, and probably the ones that you want to continue to go on in.
Thank you. And just to confirm here, you did mention that using tables or multiple columns will present issues for ATS to read the resumes.
The formatting just gets thrown off. It doesn't, it just does not look professional sometimes. And it's sometimes very, very, very difficult to make it look like something you would want to be sending. So, usually I know when I've gotten that candidate's resume, even when we initially maybe have a discussion, often if I have the Word version, I'm already picking up on some things that might create problems. So usually I'm telling a candidate. But when I'm going to present them to a job, like sometimes I'll still have formatting issues. So I'm going back to that candidate to have them help me simplify the document. Because I don't always have someone to help me. And if I can't figure it out on my own, then I need my candidate to help me for sure.
All right, thank you. And a lot of people are again asking for a resume review. So I did mention that you can call your closest ACCES employment location, and we are all currently working virtually or through over the phone. So someone will be able to start helping you with your job search, with your resume review, with mock interviews. So yes, your first step is to call your closest ACCES employment location. You can go to our website and look up our location, see which one's best close to you, and you can call. Next question here is, what should you do if you don't remember numbers from your previous position to include in your resume?
Then I would just talk to, things you've done. Yeah, you don't want to make up those numbers. But definitely as something going forward, I mean, it's a great idea to start to jot down accomplishments, whether that's in a paper form, in a notebook, or, you're keeping some kind of online document. Because, as you grow throughout your career and life sort of goes by, you're going to forget the things you've accomplished. And, during COVID, when you think about it, many people all of a sudden, maybe didn't go to work one day, but went to work at home one day, and all of a sudden got told that they weren't going to be working anymore. And they may have been scrambling, like they've forgotten and they haven't tracked this, and all of a sudden need to put together a resume. Things change in the world, things change in employment. So make sure that if you haven't already, you start to keep track of these things, so you're able to utilize them later on.
Thank you. If somebody has a lot of experience working at 4 to 5 different companies with over 10 years of experience, how do you fit that on a 2-page resume?
I mean, I think 2 to 3 is probably okay, but yeah, you're probably going to want to focus in on the more recent stuff. You might want to, refer someone to your LinkedIn profile where you're able to utilize more space. And it might take a little bit of working and, adapting things as you apply to jobs as well.
If someone has various degrees, for example, maybe 3 master's degrees, should you just mention the most recent ones or mention all of them?
I would probably mention them because often clients sometimes need background checks for education. So you want to make sure that they're going to be able to, they don't find out about it without it being there.
And is it necessary to create a LinkedIn profile?
I think absolutely in this day and age, even if you don't like any other social media, LinkedIn is a crucial tool in building your network, in your job search. You can control the privacy settings. So I would definitely encourage that.
If someone has 6 years of experience, what length of resume would you expect them to have?
I mean, I think it really depends on your experience. Without seeing it, I can't say, but often I find 1 page, people leave out too much information for the most part. If you're a new graduate, maybe not, but yeah, if you've been working for a period of time, but it depends on the positions and depends what's in there. So very, sometimes you might be able to use 1, but sometimes it is 2.
How do you manage your LinkedIn, your LinkedIn profile versus your resume? So your LinkedIn profile is kind of suited towards one profile, but you might be using different resumes to apply to different jobs. How do you handle that?
Well, I mean, your LinkedIn isn't necessarily going to be like a 100% match. You might not include all the details within there that would be in a resume. Sometimes you might, but sometimes it might only be to your network. But I would definitely make sure your dates and your titles match, because you just can't control like a hiring manager, HR going to your LinkedIn, and you've got maybe different dates, different titles on your resume to what's in your LinkedIn. And that's going to create an area of suspicion, you know? If all of a sudden, say, for example, I'm getting one resume 1 month and 3 months later, someone sends me a resume with some different titles. And then all of a sudden I go to their LinkedIn and there's different titles there. That to me is like, okay, well, what is the right story here? And that would probably be a little bit of a red flag to me.
Thank you. Is it okay to include courses that you've attended or completed over 10 years ago?
I mean, I think if they're pertinent to the job you're applying for, you can also put them into your LinkedIn. So, and it's, yeah, especially in the industry, if you've gotten certain courses, that might be, helpful. I think it depends what they are.
How can you get your resume to a recruiter or an agency?
I think just looking online, you'll see job postings. Often agencies, like they'll post jobs to their own agencies. They'll post them to, like we have a website, word of mouth through referrals. LinkedIn, you'll find individuals that work in that space. So there's a lot of ways.
If someone's new to Canada and has several years of experience in management, should they be starting from an entry-level position?
I mean, sometimes people they might not be starting from an entry level position, but they might not be standing in a management position. We don't see as many manager positions within the temporary space. It's often someone that may be going in to do the role, but sometimes we do. So, every situation is going to be different. I mean, some people are going to they may start in an entry level job. They might start in a job that's unrelated to what they are doing and might do here. So for example, I know many candidates that might, be working, at a Tim Hortons, at a Starbucks, when the stores were open, they were working there. They've been working at grocery stores. And they're doing that while they're looking for the job that, to start their career here. And there's nothing wrong with that.
After the hiring manager has confirmed everything with the references, how long after that should you wait to ask for an update or a response?
So is this that the person's getting an offer at that point? I mean,
Yeah, just to ask if
often the reference checking is happening potentially as part of that offer. So like, if I'm doing my own references, I know when I'm completed, I can tell my candidate, but if my client's doing their own references as well, we'll get updates on that background check. So
if you've sent a thank you letter after an interview and haven't heard back from the employer for like 3 weeks, should you follow up with a phone call?
Yeah, you definitely can. And it's always a good maybe idea at the end of the interview to ask, about, what the timeline is for that, that interview process. So, maybe when to follow up.
Do you have counselors to help job seekers with their resumes and cover letters at Robert Half?
No. I mean, it's just if, the recruiter you're working with may give you maybe some tips, but I don't know whether that's everyone or not.
Yeah, and then I'd just like to repeat again that if you do want that service, please call your closest ACCESS employment location and someone will be more than happy to start helping you with your resume reviews and cover letters, mock interviews, etc. Do you hire students to work on temporary roles during like breaks in their school year?
For me personally, it'd only be if the job duration met that break. And to be honest, it's not necessarily, I don't know that the timing always works for those types of roles, because we might not get a temporary role that's a fit for that person when they need that role. But I think our account temps and office team, I think they probably have, roles that have worked in the scheduling. It may not be the whole summer, but maybe it's, they get them a few assignments. But yeah, I find it's a little bit trickier in the space I'm in.
Is it okay to exclude any work experience that might not be relevant for the job?
I mean, I think it depends on where you're at. Like if you're a student starting out and you don't have any work experience except unrelated stuff, I would definitely include that. Everyone has to start somewhere. And they're often going to be doing jobs that maybe they're not doing 5, 10 years into their career.
Thank you. And how soon should you send a thank you email after your interview?
I think as soon as possible, because you don't know if you're the last interviewee in that process. So if you wait, 24 or 48 hours, they might have already made an offer for that role.
Thank you. Should you add months and years to employment history or just years?
Months and years. I will always need that in my resumes to submit.
All right. Sorry, I just missed a question here. All right. So what if accomplishments are sensitive or relate to projects that you kind of can't really talk about? What do you do in that case? If you're
I
not able
mean,
to share.
yeah, I mean, you think you maybe want to refer to it as a confidential project, you know, and maybe it's, something that you're talking about, sort of high level. But yeah, absolutely. If something is confidential, you don't want to be sharing it. Like if you're sharing information, like showing maybe a presentation or something you've done, you don't want to have confidential like information or financials about an organization. So you would definitely need to be removing that.
Thank you. What if you don't have any references that you can provide for your workplace? Who can you either use or?
Well, I think, well, HR is going to be one of them, but you definitely, even if someone's moved on from an organization, they could still be able to provide you with a reference. Yeah, because most companies are going to need past references, including us, and supervisory references, not colleagues.
Thank you. And a lot of people are again asking if how to get in touch with ACCES. I have just messaged in the chat for you the website. You can go to our website and contact any of our ACCES employment offices, and somebody will be able to help you. And yes, our services are free of charge. What is the best approach to apply when you're already employed but maybe just looking for a better job?
Well, I mean, I think you're going to be doing a lot of the same job search as if you didn't have a job, having a resume, having a cover letter, using a lot of online tools. It's going to be fairly similar. The only thing is your resume will show that you're employed to present.
Let's say your previous place of employment changed their name. Should you continue using the old name that you that was used when you were there, or should you use a new name?
I think you're probably going to need to potentially use both, because if you have
Mm-hmm.
work documentation that has the old name. So for example, the first company I worked for as a full-time job was acquired at some point. So I think if you were going to be using it, you would probably use, formally this company and then maybe with the current name, because if they had to go do a reference verification, or you have letters from that company, you're going to potentially have them in the first name, but they might be something different.
All right, thank you. I am going to take one last question because I do have some slides to go over as well. All right, so should you be putting references available on request on your resume?
No, you'll be asked for them if you get a job offer. You're just like taking up space.
All right, thank you. All right, thank you. I think this is it for now. Again, if you do have any more questions, you can find Michelle on LinkedIn or call Robert Half, or again, you can call any of our ACCES employment locations to help with your job search or your resume review. Michelle, is there anything you'd like to add before I move on to my slides?
I think just, taking a look after this, going to take a look at your resume, have you been applying a lot and not hearing anything? Maybe there's some changes that need to happen. And like Sonia said, ACCES has got some great resources. You can go to our blog, but definitely like spend the time on your resume. It's the first chance that you get to make that impression. And, if your resume is not, well, laid out and stuff like that, it might just get overlooked and you'll go no farther.
Thank you so much, Michelle, for such an insightful webinar today. Our next webinar coming up is on Tuesday, July 27th. It's called Preparing for a Job Search and Virtual Interview. So it kind of goes hand in hand with today's information that you have. That's brought to you by RBC. And if you'd like to register for our future webinars, you can go to our website /online event series, and all of our upcoming webinars you'll find there. You can register for all of them or some of them. And just keep in mind that as soon as you register for a webinar, even if you don't attend, you will receive a recording. So it's okay to just at least register. If you're not planning on attending, you will still receive a recording. And if one other thing someone said about English conversation skills, so we do have an online Talk English cafe where people just kind of practice speaking, speaking in English, using their English conversation skills. So you can check that out as well. We pretty much have one every day, and it is virtual, and you can join. I think there's one in the afternoon, one in the evening. And again, if you do want to speak to someone at ACCES, please call your closest ACCES location and someone will be able to start helping you. If you are still overseas and you will be joining us, if you will be landing in Canada in the next few months, you can email cec@accessemployment.ca to see if you'd be eligible for our pre-arrival services within these sectors mentioned here. And again, thank you all for attending. Please do visit us on our social media and follow us to see what's happening here at ACCES. We are very active on our social media on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook. So thank you all for attending today, and a very big thank you to Michelle again.
Thank you. Have a great week, and hopefully we'll see you in August.
Thank you.